All right, everyone, we are back. The DFSR team making another YouTube video while you get to watch us record our podcast. So, congratulations for being one of the lucky chosen, and let's get started.
Can I talk now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Three, two, one. All right, you're back in the DFSR. It's an NBA podcast. It's Wednesday. It's December 19th. I'm Doug Norrie. That is
James Davis.
I just noticed that I'm in the video. We're doing our YouTube video, so you can go check that over the YouTube. For some reason, I noticed when I say the date, I stick my arms out to the side. I never noticed that until it gets populated on the video, but I'm going to have to psychologically.
Yeah, video's really good for teaching you a lot of your little quirks. Like me looking out the window is mine. Like when I talk, I just like to look out the window. So
I like to look up to my right. Okay, this is a good pod. DailyFantasySportsRankings.com is the site. DFSR.com/deals. You know the drill. You go over there. You get a free 7-day trial to our projection system powered by our good friends over at Lineup Lab. It's optimal lineups for FanDuel and DraftKings NBA. We have NFL up there, NHL, which we've been beta testing our new tool to pretty positive reviews. So go check it out, along with the premium chat and premium content, all covered under one subscription package. DFSR.com/deals. It'll get you going. And like I said, go check out the YouTube channel as well. You can watch us stick our arms out and look up to the side as we break down a huge night in the NBA. 12 games in the slate. This is actually, I think, probably the biggest slate of the season, or after like the Thursday or the Friday after Thanksgiving kind of thing where no one played. But we have a huge slate of games. We're going to roll through some of these games quicker than others because on such a big slate, there's some games that just have a lot of DFS and sort of betting angles, and there's other ones that maybe just don't have as many. So if we roll through a couple of these games a little quicker than others, it's mostly from a time crunch standpoint, and then just some games warrant more discussion than others. So the 7 o'clock games, we have the Spurs. And by the way, I'm going to spend a lot of time on the Kings here too, by the way. So I'm carving out time ahead of time so I can have extra time to talk about Sacramento. I already said it. The Spurs go in and play the Magic. Spurs are 1-point road favorites over Orlando. 208 over under. When I'm talking about games that maybe just don't have a ton of DFS viability, this is kind of just the shining example, I think. I mean, would you agree? We have two teams that just don't play outside of DeRozan and maybe Vucevic. Like we have two teams that just don't play their guys a lot of minutes, generally slow, decent on defense. I guess San Antonio's not that good on defense. Thoughts? I mean, is this kind of like, if we're talking about a skip, is this one of those?
Sure looks like it. I mean, you'll see these guys crop up from time to time on small slates, like you mentioned, DeRozan. We've dabbled in some Rudy Gay when the minutes seem to be going in our direction, although the price has come up almost $1,000 from the price points where we were considering him. So yeah, unfortunately, I think this is probably one of those hard skips on a really, really big slate here.
These are the kind of games that I wish this will be the final thing I say about this game, but these are the kind of games where I wish FanDuel and DraftKings would do more like 7 o'clock only slates. They do all the other turbo slates, and we've mentioned this before, but that's like the one they don't do. And I don't know if they just feel like the main slate will just totally crush those other ones, and that's why they don't really bother. But this is a game where I wouldn't mind having some exposure to it if we just did a 3-game 7 o'clock only slate, but they just don't seem interested or incentivized to do it. There's probably just hard data around it if both sites aren't that into it. 7 o'clock, the second game is the Knicks go in and play the Sixers. No early line in this game. I'm not exactly sure why. Doesn't seem like there's any injury news kind of hanging out there, so I'm not exactly sure what would hold up the betting line from coming out, but I'm not showing anything coming in right now. Knicks are still down a few guys here. Alonzo Trier is still out. They have Mitchell Robinson is still out as well. We saw Kevin Knox move into the starting lineup. He played 37 minutes against Phoenix and inexplicably lost to Phoenix. This is a bad matchup against Philly, but I'm wondering if guys like Cantor, guys like Vonleh, I can't even believe we're going to go down this path again, 17 minutes against the Suns. Are these guys in play? And then talk to me about the Sixer side, because the Knicks, I mean, Phoenix put up 128 against the Knicks. The Knicks stink on defense. So
I mean, so on the Knicks side, I think you could think about it in the power forward spot in particular. I don't know if you would be especially excited to go there based on what we've seen recently. I think Knox at least has the floor of the minutes. They seem to like the way he plays ball, Doug, and I could see him being out there for a good chunk of time, 35 minutes plus if the game stays close. Another guy you didn't mention on the Knicks is Moutier. It's kind of a funny case here where we were playing Moutier, kind of dabbling in him. The price has shot up over the course of 4 games from 5,500 in that Cleveland game up to now 7,300. And I think now you're paying for Moutier as though he's the guy who's going to score 32, 6 and 6 in a given night. And I I would caution you to be too optimistic about that. I think we had a nice track record prior to this. I mean, I think if you go back to the 3-game stretch at the beginning of the month where he was playing 35 minutes, which I think actually is his sort of normal rotation, scoring more in that 27 to 30 fantasy point range, I think that's what you can expect. So I wouldn't get overly bullish about running Mudiay here, and that probably means I'm not interested in any of the Knicks. On the other side, yeah, I mean, we've seen Joel Embiid crush his team in the past. His price is still pretty reasonable. Butler is now back, though. What's your take on how that will affect how happy we are to play Embiid? You know, because we played him very readily when Butler was out. He crushed the Knicks in their last meeting. He went 26, 14, and 7 in 30 minutes. So happily paying this price. Do we play Embiid? Is he the big money payoff we're looking for on a 12-game slate?
Butler has no effect for me when it comes to Embiid. Really, like the on-court, off-court stuff with Butler and Embiid is nothing. Embiid's the same guy. This is the same guy that we've seen since the beginning of the season. The Sixers haven't changed their style at all, bringing Butler over. The usage on him is so low as to be almost non-existent when he's on the court with Embiid. So Butler being around, I mean, it made me feel better about the Embiid floor just from a scoring perspective. But it doesn't. Our overall projection really doesn't change at all here with Embiid. And yeah, you're right. That by the way, that New York game where he destroyed them, Butler played that game. So it's not like it just doesn't do a ton, doesn't move the needle for me really one way or the other. I think Embiid's a great play here. There's a lot of big money payoffs on this slate, which is the only thing that's going to keep him from being like, if this is a 6-game slate, then I think we're talking about Embiid as like possibly in every lineup guy. There's just a lot of other stuff kind of going on with the slate we'll get to in a little bit. One other thing about New York, Hardaway Jr. did sit out last game, which opened up more minutes in the guard position for Mudiay. Trey Burke came back and played off the bench. I get that's the only reason I can think. Okay, Courtney Lee got the start, but it was pretty non-existent. That's the only reason I can think there's no line in this game. I don't think Tim Hardaway Jr. is like a line changer, but there's no other injury news that we're really waiting on. Now there is injury news in the next game, which is the Toronto. Oh, no, did I skip a game? Yeah, no, sorry. Pause. I'm going to go back. Cleveland and Charlotte play the third 7 o'clock game. Charlotte's a huge 12.5-point favorite here, of Cleveland coming on the back-to-back on a last-second tip-in by Nance where they won last night. You know, we've seen back-to-backs really affect teams, especially when they're on the road. The road back-to-back, you get something like a 40%. You're 40% of like what your overall like just mean projection can be. I was reading some.
Wait,
more
hold on a
back-to-back.
second. Give me more. You got to unpack that a little bit. You said on a back-to-back, someone's going to get 40% of what
I gave the wrong stat. Sorry, no, pause. I gave the wrong stat. I said sorry. If you think that, sorry, no, that was the wrong thing. Your win.
Cleveland scores 40%. 40 points.
You win 40% of the time. You win 40% of the time.
Okay, so the idea being that on average, of course, teams win 50% of the time because one team wins, one team loses. But on the second half of a back-to-back, you on the road are on the road specifically.
Yep.
You are now 40%, basically a 1.5 to 1 dog to lose.
Yeah. Average. So you're like a 10% downgrade, something like that. Sorry, okay. I said that's that wrong. Okay, so anyway, this is sort of. I mean, it's somewhat reflected in Cleveland is not good. They're huge underdogs here. We did get Jordan Clarkson sitting last night. We got a huge Larry Nance game. I don't know if this is a situation where we could just see like some more bench guys. And I don't know if the blowout risk is worth the price of admission for some of these guys on Charlotte, who at this point to me seem pretty fairly priced.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it. I'm still thinking about that 40% thing.
Yeah, sorry,
I'm sitting here chuckling at myself. Charlotte's another team. Like on small slates, we've played guys like Marvin Williams. We've played Cody Zeller even. I think Zeller, you could make an argument that in games where he's a favorite to be in a close game, he can go off, and if his team sees a need to have him on the court. We've seen him run it up to 36 minutes. I think for big tournament purposes, you should be aware of that kind of 7 to 9x points per dollar upside on a big slate like this. Are you realistically going to play these guys in cash? Of course not. So, even guys like Jeremy Lamb, he saw big ownership at a comparable price point the other night. He was like 200 more actually. He was hot trash against the Lakers. He only played 23 minutes. So I just think, and granted there was game script issues there, but I don't know. So again, we're back to the huge slate. I can be pretty picky. It's still the first hour of the party, Doug, where everyone's still here and they're not all paired off. So at this point, I don't have my small slate goggles on, and I'm gonna probably just move past Charlotte.
I will say right now, in terms of our system's projections, we have the Hornets. I haven't totally betted this yet, but we're probably getting close. We have the Hornets easily covering the 12.5 here, which I find, and that's not even downgrading for the back-to-back, and that's not even downgrading for some of these other pieces. Jordan Clarkson, That would probably change it a little bit because the bench scoring is vastly improved when he is playing. So that's probably feeding into some of this. But we have right now, as of 9:30 in the morning, have Charlotte pretty easily covering the 12.5. So we can check back in to premium chat later, or actually the betting article too, and see if that one ends up being one of the recommendations. The 7:30 games, Phoenix goes in and plays Boston. Boston 11.5-point favorites against the Phoenix team who got a little feisty, I guess, with the Knicks the other day. They're coming off the trade of Ariza. It looks like Oubre is going to play tonight. I don't know if he's going to start or not. I'm not sure if they've made that determination. And they waived Austin Rivers, so that's really was just an Oubre for Ariza straight up swap, 1-to-1 swap on that trade. Boston has not much in the way of injury information, except they're getting kind of healthier now, and except for Al Horford. And I'm just not sure if as this team gets healthier, if it kind of leaves us out in the cold with the Celtics in terms of just upside of minutes, because this is not a team that really wants to run anybody any sort of real minutes, especially in games that could just get out of hand early.
Well, sure, and they're 12-point favorites here too, so I think that also is going to limit the Boston guys. They're very, very cautious about just trying to almost cheat a little bit and play Kyrie 29 minutes, 30 minutes when the game script lets them, have that little additional amount of play. I think that Phoenix is already just god-awful. I don't think Oubre playing or not would really move the line here at all. He'd be interesting play if he were to play. I think, you could see mid-30s minutes for him. We've seen Phoenix have a tendency to do that with the players they actually like, and presumably he would be in that group. Certainly they found room for Ariza to do that when Ariza was there. So, yeah, I would like Oubre. But on the Boston side, you're basically just looking at this. And again, you're back in the storytelling mode where you're like, hey, if this game stays close, it will mean that a few guys on Phoenix went off, Booker, Warren, whoever, and that would mean probably that the Celtics would be really taking advantage of an extremely fast and favorable matchup. So, yeah, that's where I would land. Again, back for cash, I'm just not seeing anyone come up even in any of our top lineups for cash games here.
Yeah, I think you just can't give enough minutes to the Celtics guys. Maybe if you knew if Horford was out and you knew Baines was going to get the start with no minutes restriction, he's going to play 25 minutes or something like that, botting up against Ayton. Maybe you start thinking about it, but that really hasn't been the case. He's played 16 and 18 minutes. Looks like they've been just kind of bringing him back from injury. So I just don't think you can do it. And then they just have too many wing guys. I will say two things about the Suns from a betting angle. Our system does like them covering this 11.5. I think part of that is because as many minutes as you can get out of Booker and Warren at this point, and this is a team that has been incentivized to play these guys a lot. They've been scoring a lot. When you have just two pretty dynamic scorers, you just have a slightly better chance. They've won their last 3 games in a row too. So that's not factoring into our betting model, but the fact getting Booker back and getting Warren back and having Warren be healthy on a full, he played 39 minutes last game, means a lot in terms of if the game can stay close, these guys can score down the stretch. So it gets a little harder to cover those numbers when you just have two dynamic scorers, and we'll see sort of what Oubre brings to the table. It's mostly just from a defensive standpoint. I don't think he's not going to swing a line just on his own, obviously. Indiana goes in and plays Toronto. This is another one that has no Vegas line on it right now because there is injury information or injury info stuff kind of hanging out there, mostly on the Toronto side. Right now, they sat a bunch of guys last game. Siakam sat last game, Lowry sat last game, and they kind of just rolled with a pretty thin team. But it looks like right now Van Vliet sat as well. Van Vliet's probable, Siakam's probable, Norman Powell is back. That's probably not going to do a ton with the minutes. And then Lowry is questionable and Ibaka is questionable. Is there just almost two? Like this is 4/5 of the guys that actually matter from this team. The only guy that's not questionable right now is Kawhi. Is it just too early to make any determinations? Obviously, like Lowry and Ibaka sitting would make a huge deal. And I don't know if you want to try to if you can give like a 30-second comment on like what the injury information does here and how we're gonna kind of play this going into lineup block.
Yeah, I'll do my best. It's tricky because there's multiple cascading questions with the Lowry news. So I guess the first question would be, it's like a flowchart, right? Is Lowry playing? Well, if yes, that probably kills most of the rest of the team because people are now a little bit more expensive after Lowry misses another couple games. The next question would be, is Fred VanVleet playing? He also missed the Denver game. So that's another one currently listed as a game time decision. I think and you're going to need definitive news, but I think if you get definitive news, then Delon Wright becomes a must-play. He played 38 minutes against Denver when both of these guys missed, and I have seen no reason why that wouldn't be the case otherwise. Like, they're essentially stone cold out of guys who can bounce the ball up the court. Danny Green is just not that guy. You could literally just full court press Danny Green, and you probably never get it past half court.
They have Lorenzo. They will have Lorenzo Brown. Not like that makes a huge difference, but they do have one more.
I guess that's right. But Brown, he's just so low impact that it's really hard to dream on him very much. I mean, he played 14 minutes against Denver. He played 0 minutes against Portland. He generally plays 0 minutes, so that's why he falls.
I'm just saying that would be their backup point guard if those other two guys sat out. That's the only
Fair
reason.
Enough. Just not DFS relevant, I guess, is my main perspective there. But yeah, I mean, both Lowry and VanVleet, those guys are both high usage guys, and if they were to sit, that opens up not only minutes for Delon Wright, but it probably opens up usage as well. And then in the Ibaka realm, this is a tougher one to say. I mean, he's played pretty much on lock since that Detroit game, but in that game, Valanciunas was healthy, and Pascal Siakam, he's also got a back thing going on. He missed our last game, so it's just a mess. I mean, maybe do you want to do the what if Ibaka misses train? Since I did the Lowry one, like, is there?
I mean, if Ibaka misses, I think you'd give a bump to Siakam. I mean,
what if Siakam misses too?
Yeah, I don't know. This is what I mean. There's too many ifs. I think we wait throughout the day to kind of
played 12 minutes last game. You're basically deep in these bench guys of people that maybe you heard of them when they were in college, but haven't been relevant in quite a long time. I mean, Anunoby is a guy who's received minutes when some of these bigger guys have been out, but
I will say one thing from a betting angle. If this line came in anything less than, if we've had like 80% of these guys were going to play, like let's say it was just Ibaka out, or something like that, sure, or just Lowry out, or something like that. If this line came in anywhere below under double digits, my strong guess is we would have Toronto as heavy favorites here. We don't need to wait to have it come in and see. Injury stuff for Toronto seems to matter a lot less than for other teams. Like when Kawhi sits, they blow people out. When Kawhi plays, they blow people out. And they lost to Denver the other night. But this team is so deep and so good that just missing one guy from there, and especially Indiana coming on the tough loss back-to-back and getting on the road and going overnight to Toronto, I think anything less than double digits would be my guess. I'd be a strong Toronto play, and we'll kind of just wait to see where some of the info comes in. Another team coming on the back-to-back is a slightly new look Washington Wizards team that played last night. I got to tell you, I watched this game. They lost to Atlanta. How this coach has not been fired yet, I just simply will not know. They're 10-18. They have John Wall, Bradley Beal. They have guys that are, Beal and Wall alone. Like if you have Beal and Wall alone and you're losing to Atlanta, who's horrible. But Washington is horrible at this point. Like I don't even know what
last year Washington with effectively the same roster had a positive point differential, made the playoffs, and went 43-39. So what does the guy need to do to keep it? They're not broken down. I don't get it.
It's crazy. So they lose. They lose by 8 to Atlanta last night. Wall had one of his worst games of the season. Walked into halftime with something like 1 fantasy point. Ended up playing 26 minutes. Was just generally pretty damn bad.
It's interesting on Wall. I'm going to make a quick note about this. You talked about the coaching thing. One of the fundamental changes for Wall this season, and over the past 2 years actually, has been his time of possession per game. And they've tried to bring him down to be more in line with, kind of average point guards throughout the league, where he used to be in that like really tight group of the top possession guys like Westbrook, Harden, that sort of thing. Just saying, 2 years ago, when Wall's time of possession was at an all-time high, again, effectively the same roster, Washington went 49-33 and won their division. And you've seen that slow attrition of time of possession from him, and you've seen them fall to the middle of the pack last year and then into the absolute dumpster tier this year. And it has to be, there's no way Wall is the one being like, I should have the ball less, like it's got to be a coaching thing. I think they're one of those teams also, or if you were to see a coaching change, you talked about this in your preseason bets that you placed. If there were to be a coaching change, Washington would instantly be a team I would be hammering the betting lines on. I would be betting their overs. I'd be betting them, the money line with the points, just assuming that a new coach would be more sensible in that regard.
Yeah, look, they did beat the Lakers the other day, so I don't want to get too crazy into like small sample size. I'm mostly just looking at
a small sample size. We're halfway
the season
through the
as a whole. I guess.
I see what you're saying. You're saying the one game you don't want to be crazy about, right? They played 31 games. How many games does he need to play?
12 and 19.
Worse a game than they were in the past. They're awful.
The only thing I think we could take from this team at this point, I know they're 11-point underdogs, is that we still should just see heavy minutes out of guys like Beal, Wall, Ariza, and Green. I don't know. Like Otto Porter's still on the bench. They are should be still hurt. hurt. They jettisoned 2 guys in Rivers and Oubre and only brought back 1 in Ariza, with replacing him with guys like Sam Decker. Sadaransky played some. They did bring in Chase and Randle to play some point guard. He did get some minutes last night because Wall was so bad. Markieff was able to foul out in 17 minutes. No easy feat against a team like Atlanta. Just get in there and just hack away. So he's a guy that if he can hit 31 minutes and not just foul everybody in sight, has some upside. And I don't know. So the minutes upside I think is there if they can keep the game close. Vegas sure doesn't seem to think it is. What about on the Houston side? I mean, Washington, 118 points from Atlanta last night. Their team's not good on defense. Is this the time to play guys like Harden, Chris Paul, even Capella? They've been destroyed by centers this year. Are these guys in play tonight?
Yeah, what's your Chris Paul take real quick? Because he's a guy that our system has had questions about. And I feel like I almost had to go back and just really double check and make sure we had all the correct inputs. He's not really showing up right now, but at 8,200, we've certainly seen Paul pay off in the past. Again, it seems like while we're here talking about a small slate and you just look at the recent game log, I'm still bearish on Paul. We have the one Portland game where he was solid on this price, kind of did it in an unusual way with 11 random rebounds. But other than that, he seems like a very solid 36 fantasy points a minute guy, or 36, that would be a lot of fantasy points, 36 fantasy points per game, which is just trash on 8,200.
Yeah, I'm not interested. If Harden's around, Harden just dominates the time on ball, dominates the usage. Paul
actually gets reasonable time on ball. It's kind of strange when you go and look at that stuff. He has the ball in his hands a decent amount considering Harden's on the court. But
let me rephrase. It doesn't translate to usage for him.
Exactly. It doesn't translate to
his time on ball
either.
Yeah, his time on ball is a lot of probing, getting in the lane, sort of turning around, finding someone else, and getting some kind of mismatch because he's probed on the I use the word probe twice, but he's just kind of gotten inside. Yeah, a lot of probing. He's gotten inside the lane, and he's not really looking to shoot in there. He's looking to get someone to have switched on him and then space the court. So the time of ball for different guys is just born out different. That's not what John Wall does. John Wall just dribbles at the top of the key. It takes a bad mid-range shot, something like that. That's not really Paul's.
To be fair, or he'll get into the lane, kind of similar to Harden. The more slash and kick style of being a point guard, which is very popular these days, which tends to lead to a lot of points if the defenses don't rotate properly, or a lot of assists if they don't rotate properly and leave someone open. But what do you think about Harden? I mean, we've missed the short-term run-up here. He was a heavily chalk play against the Lakers. He went absolutely off. We didn't have it. People played him against Memphis. We didn't have it. Terrible matchup. He went off again on this price. Then he's against Utah. We're finally okay, well, at least we don't have to play Harden now. He just has the highest point total of all and just goes for 47 points from the field and 72 fantasy points. We've missed this run-up. This is arguably the best matchup of those 3 games. Is Harden's price too low right now?
It could be. If you think he's going to play 39 minutes or something like that in close games, 41, 41, 35 over the last 3. If you think that's the plan and the plan is just going to get him 25 shots or something like that, then yeah, we're definitely too low. I don't really have any other way around that. I'm a little worried that these things do come back down to earth, especially as teams say, oh, you know what? You played 41 over the last 2. We're playing Washington tonight. This is kind of the night where we can take our foot off the gas just a little bit. I would be a little concerned about going crazy bullish minutes on Harden. And I'm with you that we've been low on him in the short term. And this just happens in basketball. Also you want to talk about some crazy numbers. This guy, he put up 31 points against Utah. He put up 31 shots from the field against Utah. He also got to the line 16 times. That usage rate is unreal. 16, 13, and 19 free throws attempts per game over the last 3. That's just unbelievable. There's been a lot of. I'm going to move on after this comment, unless you want to comment about it. But there's been complaints from teams saying the guy, you just can't even touch the guy because he gets foul calls on every single time he goes to shoot. He's perfected a way to just get someone to foul him under the legal rules of the game. On these rip moves, these curl moves they still get called. He walks his body into guys. And if you think that, but I actually think the reason to be bearish on him is because those free throw numbers just can't really sustain. You just can't get to the line 17 times a game. It's not really possible. So that would be my concern. And Washington fouls a lot and they're bad on defense. So maybe this is not the game where he takes a break on. All right, let's move on. After this game, this one has some injury stuff too. Detroit goes in and plays Minnesota. Minnesota 4.5 point favorites here. They are coming off a crazy game against Sacramento where they just blew the doors off the Kings. Kings kind of just took it as a schedule loss. But we did get Jeff Teague out that game, and Derrick Rose got the start. Going into tonight, Teague has already been listed out for this game as well. I don't think we can translate last game's minutes onto this one because the game was just completely over by halftime. And so where do we stand with guys like Derrick Rose? Maybe usage bumps for guys like Wiggins and Towns. Feels like just even having one guy like this out for Teague could make a pretty solid difference in terms of DFS lineups tonight.
Yeah, I think it could. I mean, I think Rose, he's been a guy that's been very playable at this price point in the past. We've shown that he's willing to get in there and just kind of take over. Like, he doesn't have any of those confidence issues that might normally plague a guy who's kind of filling in off the bench. So I think if you can sign him up for mid-30s minutes and the usage that's commensurate with what he gets, even when he's kind of generally being the change of pace guy off the second unit, then I think you can go there. I guess the question mark for me is, we had this game where Teague just missed, and I mean, Rose got there on the price, but he only played 24 minutes against Sacramento.
No, remember, that game was a huge blowout, though.
No, I know, but I'm saying, like, so we don't, I guess what I'm saying is we still have this sample, whether it was a blowout or not, we still only have what we had. But I guess if you're projecting out him playing those high 30s minutes, then sure, I think he's a great play. You did see some other guys that weren't Rose, like Covington still played 35 minutes in that game. So, like, not everyone lost their minutes, but Rose did. And that's something that, at least is on my radar a little bit. But I guess when you see guys like Wiggins also losing his minutes, it probably wasn't a personal thing about Rose or anything.
Yeah, I'm just going through real quick. I was just going to look up. So the last time Teague sat out for an extended period of time, Rose played 35, 37, 35, and he sat out one of these games too. In 39 minutes. I think we have a long stretch of games where Teague sat, where we just have Rose playing like that 36 to 37 minutes. I'm completely fine going pretty high in his projection here. The Pistons don't guard the perimeter all that well. Now that's a little different for him because Rose is not, much of an outside, doesn't have a huge outside game. He's more of like a slasher. But I think the price did not really come up enough for, if you think this guy is going to play 36 minutes out of the point guard spot, 6,200 again on FanDuel seems like a pretty easy call. We have him as one of the best points per dollar guys in the system. Pretty much there on DraftKings as well. The only problem with DraftKings is you really do get extra points for that. The more 3-pointers you hit, that extra half point for 3-pointers does make a difference. And Rose is just not a huge 3-point shooter. He's done it in the past at times, but you really can't count on him. That's the only thing that kind of drives his price down just a little bit on DraftKings because, if you take 7 3-pointers a game or something like that, that 1.5 extra points of expectation just actually does make a pretty big difference on DraftKings. Towns 9,700 on DraftKings. That he's coming in 100% of lineups right now. Seems like way too low of a price. Would you feel comfortable running him in cash games over there on DraftKings?
Yeah, I think so. I think on FanDuel he's actually competitive as well. 9,900.
100% of lineups there too.
Yeah, it just depends on, again, the minutes. But and Towns is kind of a funny one. Like, our projection on him on the surface feels a little high based on the season-long production. But again, we know that even though Minnesota hasn't played in a ton of close games, that when it is close, and specifically when they have a real need for him, Towns will stay out there for 37 plus minutes in the way that a lot of centers won't. And you have to think against a team that features Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond that tonight would be that night. So yeah, I can play some Towns tonight.
And then on the other side, Minnesota is not the best defense in the world, especially against the bigs. Could you see a situation where Drummond and Blake are able to get their full run of minutes? Because that's really the only thing that holds these guys back from a fantasy perspective, specifically Drummond, is if he can play 35 minutes, he's got 20-20 potential like no one else in the game. And it's just that he just gets buzzed off with the run sometimes.
Yeah, I think you can make a strong case. Again, if you just look at year-long production for both of these guys, Drummond has outperformed Towns from a fantasy perspective. Drummond is cheaper. Minnesota plays faster, and they play worse defense on average. So there's basically just all marks in favor of playing Drummond. So right. I think unless Teague being off the court for some reason boosts Towns in a way that I don't anticipate. I haven't actually looked at this query and have no general sense of how that's worked out. But on the surface, Drummond seems like just kind of a better play.
Okay, moving on. Another game that has a lot of fantasy implications here, and then we're going to do this one and then skip a couple games and get to the end. But New Orleans goes in and plays Milwaukee. The key here is that New Orleans is going to be without Mirotic and without Julius Randle. So those guys have both already been ruled out of this one. So that would mean on the surface that seems to be like, then we just want to bust Anthony Davis just through the roof here, and I'm just worried they're just missing too much at this point. That's an 8-point favorite in terms of Milwaukee. And Milwaukee's been very good this season. But at some point, does the fact that they're just missing anything that could alleviate some of just the defensive positioning, anything that could alleviate some of like the defensive attention that a guy like Davis is going to get? How much does that worry you? Because obviously our projection for him is going to be through the roof. This is just a lot of big man minutes gone.
Yeah.
Does that make up for the fact that like I could also see Pelicans just getting rolled here? Like this team is really light on talent. So I don't know. What are your thoughts here on the Pelicans and Milwaukee? And am I overthinking this?
Maybe. I think the Pelicans, they'll still have Drew. They'll still have Davis, like you mentioned. I think that's like a reasonable core to jump off from. It helps in Milwaukee too. Like they're kind of a funny team. They obviously have some insane talent, and like Giannis in particular is kind of a singular talent. But he, like missing those other pieces like Mirotic and Randle and stuff, that like those guys weren't going to be able to stick Giannis anyway. So I guess I just don't worry about it too much. And I think New Orleans also has shown a tendency to be a lot more optimistic than other teams when it comes to how much they're actually in games, which is to say they'll just leave Davis out there even if they're down by 9 with 4 minutes left, like just fine. Like he's going to be out there trying to do his thing and trying to rack up numbers. So I think Davis, like you just look at the game record, or the game log rather, it takes an act of God essentially for him to not play 37 minutes a game. I think he gets his minutes tonight, barring foul trouble, but Milwaukee's not really probably very positioned to put him in foul trouble either. So yeah, I really love Davis tonight. If I can prioritize an area to spend up, he would probably be very, very short on that list because New Orleans has no other plan.
I'd love to play him and Giannis together, frankly.
Yeah,
the New Orleans has no way to match up against Giannis here at all. That's not like losing these guys like Mirotic and Randle doesn't really swing the needle. Those guys weren't going to guard him, but I think that there's a case to be made for just playing those two guys together. Like those Minnesota guys do muddy it a little bit because they're coming at pretty good deals, and you at some point just can't spend up for everybody. And right now, Giannis is coming in some top FanDuel lineups. Anthony Davis is kind of hanging around. I am going to want to know what their plan is for the starting unit here. I think that's going to matter because whoever they put at the power forward or center, like they started Okafor in the past, if Check Diallo starts, or if they just end up going small and start Davis at the 5, that would probably open up some value somewhere because the Bucks don't have a lot in the terms of interior defense. So they end up just going if they end up going center and like playing someone there to kind of match up against Brook Lopez, that isn't, you're not at risk of running afoul of like foul trouble and other stuff like that. So
right. I like Brook Lopez coming the other way too, by the way, just while you're on that subject. I think that's
I mean, I don't, the only problem is if they just kind of guard him with Davis, but I think they're probably going to stick Giannis on him. So this is an interesting game, a lot of moving parts here. I'm hoping we get something in the way of Pelicans, a starting lineup from them. And we'll kind of have to wait and see. Brooklyn goes in and plays Chicago. Brooklyn coming on the back-to-back here as well. They were without Allen Crabbe last night. We got Kurix, who got the start again, got in foul trouble. He was sort of a chalkier play and then just ran afoul of just foul stuff. Good matchup against Chicago. And I don't know, we saw a shorter slate with Brooklyn guys that had pretty decent ownership. And we've sort of just, again, been burnt by Nets minutes in the past. And we could talk a little bit about Chicago as well. Thoughts on this game?
Yeah, you spoke to my thoughts about getting burned on the minutes. That's my general feeling kind of about both of these teams on some level. Both of them also really represent an extremely good matchup going the other way. I think I'm a little bit spoiled, especially on the Brooklyn side, because I played some Nets this year and been somewhat satisfied when I have, and almost all of that comes when I have significant holes in the lineup. So Karis LeVert going down was the first one that really opened up a decent amount of value. He's been out for a long time now. Prices have had some time to kind of catch up. Crabbe has been out only more recently, and we've seen people experiment with playing like Joe Harris in cash games. That's been somewhat fruitful. So I think if you just look at their kind of wing-ish, small forward sort of minutes, if you think this game stays close, Harris could be a solid cash game inclusion. Small forward tends to be pretty weak. I think I'm actually higher on both sides of this game than I normally would be for a Brooklyn-Chicago game, just because you just have a lot of, and they're not even heavy hitters, but what passes for heavy hitters on these teams. Obviously, Levine's still out for Chicago too. So, I think you can, I don't know that I want to go out of my way. It's not like these guys don't make the slate or anything, but I could absolutely consider it.
I will say for Chicago, in games where you can project them for like max minutes in a close game, their starters do have upside because in a close game against the Spurs, Markkanen played 37, Holiday played 42, RC Adakano played 39, and Chris Dunn played 36. This is a team that will run the start. They will run the starters out there in close games. It didn't happen last game because they got blown out against OKC. But actually, one guy I could see a huge game from, and he actually might fill a power forward need if you want to go out on a limb, is Wendell Carter Jr. His biggest problem is foul trouble. He gets in foul trouble, and he just can't stay on the court. When he's on the court, hit 5,300. Remember, this Nets he plays center. So this Nets team is about as bad as it gets defensively against opposing centers this year. Now he's listed as a power forward on FanDuel. If you think this is like a max minutes, and I'm saying max minutes like 29 minutes for Wendell Carter Jr., we have him at 27 minutes. Might be a little bullish, but at 5,300, he's got a pretty good points per dollar play in our system, number 3 overall. So, and Hollis Jefferson going the other way, I think it's interesting as well if you think you can get him up there. So, yeah, there's definitely some fantasy stuff here, maybe mostly concentrated around the power forward position. I like Markkanen a lot too, although the price has come up. Without Levine, he's taken a ton of shots. He's basically their highest usage guy when Levine is out of the lineup, which he still is. So, this will be one to keep an eye on. Definitely some fantasy stuff here. I'm going to kind of skip by the next 2 games from a fantasy perspective because we're running low on time. Golden State goes in and plays Utah. Memphis plays Portland. Both of these games, if you're interested in playing some late slate stuff, I think you can go for it. All 4 of these teams very good on defense. 3 of the 4 are very, very slow, and you're getting paced down just about everywhere across the board. So I think we can kind of roll past those because I need to save 5 minutes to talk about the Kings here. OKC goes in and plays. The Kings. Thunder are 5-point road favorites. Kings coming off a game that reminded me of why I didn't like the team that would not be named last season in terms of just like the rotations and their minutes. They've fallen out of that trap this year, but they do the all-timer where they start the game against Minnesota the other day. The starters play 3 starters play less than 8 minutes.
They didn't like what they were seeing out there. You just want them to be kind of robots who just always have to play the same guys. Good Lord.
They were getting killed and they were coming on the back-to-back, and I get it. We had no news that this was going to be anything like this, but also very quickly seemed like it had been the plan to begin with. I'm not really sure. They fight
tooth and nail with Golden State. They beat Dallas, and then they have one bad game, and you're back on the team who shall not be named.
Well, I guess should I be though? I mean, how worried are we at this one game? Was this just like a schedule loss? I mean, these occur in the NBA for sure. Like there's teams that will just say this we're at the mercy of the schedule here. It's a back-to-back. We don't want to overtax our guys. We have a good thing going, and we played pretty solid rotations this year. And then you see a game like this, and it kind of just throws me into a flux. What are your thoughts here on the Kings? And then we'll just talk real quick about Westbrook and Paul George.
Well, yeah, for starters that not all teams do that, right? And so it could be a schedule loss all at once, but like not all teams would go, Bjelica and play him 5 minutes, right? Like that just wouldn't be a thing that you would probably see Golden State do, right? So I think for starters, yeah, it's definitely worth noting that happened. I think after that incredible debacle, I would actually suspect that they'd be more inclined to go the other way here, and because we also know that they'll leave Hield out there for 39 minutes sometimes, right? That Fox can play high 30s minutes when the game script calls for it. So I think if this is a home game as well, it's a lot harder to pull this nonsense at home when you have your home fans who actually paid to come out to see the game in the stands. I think the Kings play their full minutes tonight. I think that it's a different question altogether whether they're good DFS plays or not, but I wouldn't be so worried about the minutes going into tonight.
The only injury news here, Shumpert and Bogdanovic are both questionable. Shumpert sat out the last 2 games. That has moved Bogdan into the starting lineup, but now Bogdan has a sore right foot. Not sure we'll have the injury news ahead of time. If both of those guys sat, then I think we could go Buddy Hield at maybe max minutes, especially if the game is going to stay close. OKC is a very good defensive team, so you're not really getting away with a ton. And then finally, we've talked about a lot of big money guys. The Kings play super fast. We just saw Minnesota just drop, just drop 1 million points on them. Is Westbrook or even maybe Paul George, who's been able to sustain a pretty high fantasy floor this season, even with Russ on the court. Either of these guys come close to cash game plays for you. Paul George 9,400, and Westbrook is in that high 11 or mid 11,000 range like usual. Strikes me as a good matchup, and we just talked about a lot of big money plays here. Where do these guys tier in for you compared to the other guys?
Yeah, they're looking pretty good to me, actually. I think George, he actually has gotten himself into a position now where he's average paying this price over the course of the season. So if you can picture him playing his full run of minutes, Vegas sees this game as being somewhat close. We know his full run is something like 36 to 39 minutes. He's absolutely a guy you can consider. I don't know if he's like an elite enough play that I would go out of my way to do it. Like, if I can only pick a few guys and I have to decide between, like, if I can't afford Giannis and Davis and George or something, I don't know if I would go moving my lineups around to get him in there. But I'd be happy to play him. And Russ is kind of in the same boat. I think he's always a solid option at around that $11,000 price tag. He contributes across the board. It really raises his floor pretty dramatically. And blowouts don't seem to matter as much for him because he tends to run them. My kid is getting upset because I'm running up against the end of my time here, Doug. But that being said, I think that I could see a lot of OKC ownership today.
Yep. We're going to get out of here. DFSR.com is the site. DFSR.com/deals gets you started on that free 7-day trial to our projection system powered by our good friends over at Lineup Lab. Optimal lineups, FanDuel, DraftKings, NBA, NFL, NHL. It's all covered under one subscription package. So go check that out. We'll be around all evening talking basketball. So go get into the premium chat and we'll discuss lineups leading for the hours into lock. You're all good to go. DFSR.com/deals. Buddy, enjoy your Wednesday night in basketball.
Peace.